so you've got all these things going on, and it's it um, it wasn't good. And then getting back to that Houston game, uh, let me get. We beat Miami for the first time there to win the AFC outright in '78, and that was the first time we'd beaten them in Miami in about 10 or 15 years. I know it was the first time I'd beaten them in Miami, and there were when Fairbanks had there's a couple of things that happened. First of all, not letting not Fairbanks had negotiated a contract with me and Leon in '77, and the Sullivans refused to let us sign it. Well, that was strike number one. In '78, if you remember, that's when Daryl Stingley had his neck broken.
Yeah, Jack Tatum.
Yeah, and so um, what most people don't realize is that Daryl was doing the same thing we were. He was playing preseason without a contract. But he had told Coach Fairbanks he wasn't going to go on the road without a contract. So the day we were catching the plane to go to Oakland, Fairbanks called him in his office and said, "Here's what I've got." And he says, Daryl agreed to it. And all of a sudden, so anyway, uh, the, the way it happened was Daryl gets hurt, and, he's got this verbal agreement. So at, after we found out that Daryl was going to be alive and not dead, uh, Jack Sands, his attorney, called the Sullivans and said, "I want to finalize that verbal agreement." The Sullivans refused to honor that agreement. A lot of people don't know that. Not only did they refuse to honor that agreement, but what they went to court, and basically the Sullivans said they did this for that and did that for Daryl and did this as a gift to take care of it. That's a bunch of bull crap. That was a settlement on the courtroom steps. They gave him nothing. So anyway, Fairbanks said that was it. I'm leaving here. I'm out of here in '79 or seven, and so or in '78. And when we went down to Miami, we had two head coaches. Hank Bulla coached the defense, and Ron Earhart coached the offense. They kicked Fairbanks out of the darn locker room. The Sullivans did. And so that carried over into the Houston game. So you can understand the turmoil we had then in '78. I mean, it was you, the Sullivans could screw up a wet dream, man. I mean, they were awful.
Okay, so '82 rolls around. Uh, Here comes Ron Meyer. You go to the playoffs, 5-4 is a strike shortened season. We set the Dolphins, but during that season, one of the more memorable games in NFL history was the 3-0 game against the Dolphins in frozen conditions at Schaefer Stadium. The stadium worker had used a snowplow to assist John Smith to win the game with a field goal. Talk about that game. That was a very familiar game in NFL history. Talk about that.
Ron Meyer was another guy that could mess up with it. Ron Meyer knew about. If you took Ron Meyer's knowledge of football and put it in a thimble, it'd be like a BB in a trash can. He knew nothing, and and, and all he was public relations. He was awful, and it, he sent the guy out there and he scraped the field guy that scraped the field scraped it in the wrong place and actually put snow where the ball was put down. So it didn't help us one way or the other. So I mean, Ron Meyer, he was a joke. He was just a literal joke.
Wow. Okay. So the final season in '85, you definitely turned it up, and you had a great run. You had you finished third in the AFC East, but you went 11-5. Talk about the. I just want to go over the playoff games, the run to the Super Bowl. That's your final season. Talk about the Jets game. You go into the Jets Giant Stadium against the Jets and win 26-14. Talk about that win, because really you was that it had to be like the first playoff win as a player. Talk about that first win in the playoffs, correct? Because you've been in the playoffs at times, but this is your first win in the playoffs. Talk about that. Is that correct?
It was a lot of fun. It was a hard fought game, and they had a great defensive line with Joe Klecko and Gassino and Salam and all those guys. And it was a hard fought game. I remember it was. I mean, it was a fight. But what we had that year is we had an unbelievably great defense. We had a pair of bookends with Don Blackman and Andre Tippett. Uh, that basically, uh, if you tried to double team one of them, the other one would hit the quarterback. If you double team the other one would hit the quarterback. And we had a great defensive line. We had great linebackers, and it was just we had a much better at that time. We had a much better defense. I think our defense was better than our offense, and they came to play that day. Not only did we have a great defense, but our special teams really performed well all year too. We had a lot of great special team players and a lot of guys that made plays on special teams.
Okay. The next game I want to talk about divisional playoffs. You go against the at the time Los Angeles Raiders. You win 27-20. Talk about winning your second consecutive playoff win for yourself personally for the Patriots, and you win 27-20 against the Raiders. Talk about that.
Well, I think it's the same thing. I mean, I think we had a couple of fumble recoveries. Had a few interceptions. We controlled the takeaways, and it enabled our offense then to have our running game and do what we needed to do. And it was just again a really hard fought game. My brother Charlie was, matter of fact, playing left guard for the Raiders at that time, and it was just a knockdown drag out, and we were able to come out on top at the end.
Okay, now you advance to the AFC Championship game, one win for the Super Bowl, and you beat your division rival. You beat the Jets in the same division. Now you beat the Dolphins, a team that was in the Super Bowl the previous year. They lost to the 49ers, that great team. You beat them 31-14. Talk about that performance as you go to your first Super Bowl.
That was a I was in the rain, and it was real muddy that day. I remember that. So that helped out a lot. Where you come from a cool climate like Boston, and then you go down and try to play Miami, that heat gets to you. Let me tell you, it gets hit to you, and because you're not in condition to play in that climate. And luckily, I think because of the rain, that helped us out a lot as far as the weather conditions. And then we stuck with our running game, which was our offense's strong point. We could run the ball a lot better at that time than we could pass it. And we stuck with that our netting. We had Weathers that played a great game. Tony Collins played a great game. We just had some good running backs there, and our offensive line was able to make some cracks that they took advantage of.
Okay, so now you're in Super Bowl 20, and you go against a great team, Chicago Bears, that 46 defense. Obviously, offense line, you had to deal with that versus defense. It's all about getting ready for that team during that Super Bowl week in New Orleans during that time. Unfortunately, you lose 46-10, but let's talk about how great that team was, especially on the defensive side.
They had a lot of talent. You had Dave Hampton and Dave Tipton, Dan Hampton and Dave Tipton, Marshall, Denton, and they were just great players. The other thing was the concept of that defense. It was new, and nobody really understood how to protect it. Buddy Ryan found a way of saying, I can always rush one more guy than you can block. And if I man cover, I can man cover anybody for 1.5 seconds. So he would do a lot of read blitzes. If somebody stayed in, they were coming. So there was always sending one guy more than you could block. So it required a lot of fast, you know, quarterback had to set up, read, and throw. Um, the other, and I'm not taking away from the talent because, like I said, they had unbelievable talent, Singletary and the rest of them. But they had an unbelievable scheme too. And if you remember, the team that beat them in the regular season, the only team that beat them was Miami.
Yeah, yeah,
And
Monday night
that's
football.
right. And I don't know if you remember the game, but what they would do is Marino would back up and get a set, and all the defense then the blitzers were coming all that. And then all of a sudden, Marino would roll out of the pocket and throw the ball. Remember that to Clayton and those guys. Well, all he was doing was buying that extra 1 to 2 seconds to get those guys open on one-on-one coverage, on man coverage. So Shula figured it out before anybody else did, and he knew how to beat him. And unfortunately, more people didn't study what he did and how he countered that defense, and our coaches surely didn't. And and not only that, but we started out the game passing when, in essence, our strength on offense was the run game. And I think we should have been more. We you stick to your knit. You don't go to a you go with what got you there, right? That's what, and we didn't do that. So that hurt us too. So it was a very embarrassing night for me, and I remember uh, just it wasn't a fun experience at all for me.
Yeah, that fortunately that'll be your last game. What made you want to retire and make that your final season in '85? You felt it's time to move on to greener pastures.
3 surgeries.
Oh, okay.
I had both shoulders operated on. I played the last half of the season with 2 torn rotator cuffs, and also had a bad knee and didn't know what had happened. And when he looked at my knee, um, I'd torn my posterior cruciate in 1977, and uh, when he scoped my knee, there was absolutely no cartilage left in my knee, and plus I'd stretched out my medial collateral. So the doctor called me in his office and said, you can't tell anybody I told you this." But when Bert Zarins became the orthopedic surgeon for the team in '78, I think, uh, I'd looked at him and I said, "Here's what I want you to promise me, Bert." I said, "If you ever see where I'm going to permanently damage myself to where I can't go out with my kids and play with my kids, I want you to let me know because I don't want to spend the rest of my life crippled." Because I'd known Bobby Orr and saw how Bobby Orr was walking and limping around and doing things. And I said, I don't want to be like that. And Jim Otto had become a friend of mine, and I saw what condition Jim Otto was in. So anyway, after that, Bert called me in his office. He said, "John, remember that conversation we had when I first got here?" I said, "I do." He said, "It's that time." And I said, "Well, tell me what's going on." He said, "Well, you could play, but if you continue to playing, you won't be able to walk. We'll have to, you're not going to be able to walk." So I said, "All right, Bert, that's it then." And so that's why I gave it up. Basically, I just nobody wants to give it up, but at some point in time, you're forced to.
Okay, so 6 years later, you inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. The first Patriots to be inducted to the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Talk about that experience, being the first Patriot, just being. Was you a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Yeah.
Okay, talk about that experience.
Uh, the greatest thing about that experience was that the guy that inducted you into the Hall of Fame at that time had to be affiliated with the NFL in some way. Well, my dad had played for the New York Giants in 1951, so my dad got to induct me into the Hall of Fame, and that was a great honor for me to have my dad introduce me into the Hall of Fame. Now, as far as to me, it was a lot. Pro Bowls and All Pros, those were great awards. Don't get me wrong, but the Hall of Fame is a lifetime achievement. You know what I'm trying to say? It's a career award, and that would meant a whole lot to me. Now it was a lot different back then. Now they've got all those big parties and everything else. All they had these big shindigs. My party was I went up to the hotel room. My mom, my dad, and my high school coach were there. We sat around and drank Coca Colas and talked, and that was our big party back in those days.
Yeah. Mhm. All right. Last question. Ray Guy, unfortunately, passed away a few weeks ago. He's part of your same draft class, correct? 1973.
Yep.
Right.
Played
For the
against the
listeners,
Southern Miss.
yeah. For those not familiar with him, those listening, they got listeners. Talk about how great Ray Guy was. He's the greatest punter ever. The field position, the hang time. Talk about the importance of a punter, having a punter, and obviously the ones you were offensive lineman. That's usually taken for granted because they always talk about the quarterback, the running back, the wide receivers. You played on them just as important position because you make things go. The offensive line got to block. They got to pass protect. Just talk about the necessity of having a punter and of being an offensive lineman because that's what makes it go. Field position and blocking and protecting the quarterback.
Well, I'm going to tell you a story about Alabama when we played it when it was at Mississippi Southern. And Ray and I got to be good friends later on. And I liked Ray. I mean, I really liked Ray. He was a character, and he played defensive back, was a safety, and I mean he'd light you up too. Now let me tell you, he'd light you up in the college ball. And but anyway, we're in the wishbone, and we got the ball on our own 20, and we would run like a 13 play drive and get it down to about their 20, and then something would go wrong. We'd either fumble it or we'd miss a field goal or we did something, and he'd get back there. Basically, he's punting from. He's standing on the 10-yard line when he's punting. And now we have to go all the way back to our 10 or 15-yard line and drive another 85 yards in a wishbone, right? 4 yards in a cloud of dust, and try to score again. So we'd have another 14 play drive. Something would go wrong. And Coach Bryant chewed our rear end off at halftime. But Ray Guy was the guy that did it because it's hard to have a 12, 14 play drive without any mistakes. And Ray was just, I mean, he he could pound that ball. I mean, when he kicked it, it sounded like a shotgun going off. And he could place it. I mean, he could do things with that ball. with his feet that most quarterbacks can't do with his hands. So Ray Guy was a game changer when it came to the kicking game, and not only that, but he wasn't your normal kicker. You know, he didn't have to sit at the end of the bench because he was kind of different. You know what I mean? He wasn't different. He was one of the guys. He was tough as nails. You know, he made a lot of tackles on that punt team, and I think he kind of missed playing DB and getting back there and forcing that run some. I really feel he was a tough nut. Good guy.
Yeah, again, elaborate more on like an offensive line, because Hall of Fame offensive lineman, because that's very important. Because it gets it's unglamorous. You've got 300 plus guys blocking, but talk about the importance of being an offensive lineman, because that's just as important as a quarterback. Talk about that.
Well, it is. The modern day game is a lot different. You know, and because the offensive linemen are more or less, it seems like they kind of grab a hold of a guy and they just kind of stay in contact with him, and the back kind of finds the hole. But when we were playing, offensive linemen actually created the hole, and there was a lot of respect between offensive linemen and running backs because we knew they had defined the hole, and we knew we had to create the hole, and so there was a lot of respect there. Um, and there on the passing game with the pocket and all, there was a lot of things there that there's I don't know if you saw the Blind Side or anything like that, but there is a truth in that film, and that um, offensive linemen have a protective attitude. Um, it's very unselfish. They want to take care of other people, and they do. Um, and that's our job. And it would break my heart if I let a guy get through and hit ropes. I mean, I'd feel sorry about it. And because I knew what a tough guy he was, and I'd get mad at him sometimes because I'd say, Gross, I can only keep this guy out 3 seconds. I said, you got to get rid of the ball. He says, yeah, but I got to give Stanley time to get open. And so he's willing to take that blow to get that extra time. But so there was that respect between the two of them, between the offensive lineman and the quarterback. Not only that, but back then we ran a lot of sweeps, and there was a lot of coordination. People don't realize this, but one of the things that I tell people, I wasn't a great pull blocker. I said all I had to do was run, and because I'd run, and basically the back would be in my hip pocket, and what he would do is he would see the field and he would set me up. In other words, he might move to my right hip, which would force that defensive back or linebacker to move to the outside, so I could hit him and stiff arm him, basically, and then the back would come back to my left hip, and then I could keep running and go make a second block. But it wasn't me; it was the back, because the back set it all up. And so there's a lot more teamwork when we played than there is today. It's much more individualistic than today's game.
Right, man.
Is that the answer you were kind of looking for?
Yeah. Just the new one. This is the points of the offensive line, because again, it gets overshadowed by the quarterback, running back, and the wide receivers. They're the glamorous positions, and the
Well,
offensive line is not glamorous.
have you seen Alabama play this year?
Yeah, I've been watching Alabama. Yeah, I watched them yesterday. Yeah, I watched the
All
whole
right.
time.
They got a great quarterback, don't
Yeah, Bryce Young.
they? Yeah, a great quarterback. They got a good running back, Gibbs, too, don't they?
Yeah,
Are they as productive as they need to be?
no,
Why?
the offensive line.
Don't have an offensive line.
And penalties.
So there, that tells you that you can have all the skill positions you want, but if you don't have that offensive line to make those holes or to provide that protection where the quarterback doesn't have to run around for his life, it ain't gonna happen. Period.
Yeah, yeah, penalties too.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
offsides, holding, everything. I mean, it was just, and that's where Alabama. They've got a great quarterback. They got a good running back. They got average receivers, but their offensive line really is bad. I
yeah,
mean, they're not that good. Now, whether it's
yeah.
coaching or whether it's the talent, I don't know, but they aren't producing. Let's put it that way.
One more thing before I let you go. Saban and Bryant. Is there similarities with Saban? Does he remind you of Bryant, Coach Bear Bryant?
No, no,
Okay,
not very different.
very good.
Uh,
Okay,
very different. Uh, Bryant would take what he had and turn them into ball players. I mean, you've heard the story of Coach Bryant and all the things he put his players through. I
yeah,
mean,
yeah,
yeah. I mean, he's the week before we played Southern Cal my sophomore year when they beat us so bad. He said on the Saturday before we played that game, Coach Bryant sent 10 people to the hospital with heat stroke and dehydration.
yeah,
That's how hard practice was. And he comes in the next day and he says, "Well, boys, y'all learned a big lesson yesterday." He said, "You'll push yourself and think you're going to die, but the human body's an amazing machine. It'll always pass out before it dies." And that's what he thought. And it was a great lesson to learn, but I don't want to have to learn it again. One time's enough for me. That was a terrible day, but it taught you a lesson. And people, you see all these guys now holding up four fingers for the fourth quarter and all that stuff. Coach Bryant started that, and the boys that hold up their fingers now do not understand what that means. What that means is we've worked harder, we've paid a bigger price than that other team, and it's the fourth quarter now, and it means more to us than it does to them. That's what it means because we've worked harder than them, and it means more. And that's the way Coach Bryant believed. Saban is the best recruiter, has been the best recruiter that I've ever seen. He gets more talent than any coach in the NCAA. How he does it, I don't know, but he does it. And I think and he's gotten good coaches. So I think his big thing is gathering talent. Whereas Coach Bryant didn't so much depend on. He wanted talent. Don't get me wrong. He liked talent too, but he took what he had and he made them, and that's the difference.
yeah. That's a good contrast. Comparing contrast. Yeah, they different. Okay, so that the Junction Boys. That's that. There was a movie about that. About Brian, the way he treated the player. Junction Boys, right? That was the name of the movie.
Yeah.
Things like that. Yeah. All right, man. Thank you for your
Well,
time, man. It's been
wait, one more story.
yeah,
My Uncle Bill was in Alabama in 1957 when Coach Bryant came, and they practiced behind Old Freeman Hall, which is a dormitory at the university. And one day they went out to practice, and there was this big wire fence all the way around the practice field. And everybody said, "Well, Coach Bryant's built up this wire fence, so the fans couldn't get in and disturb practice." The players said, "No, he built that fence so that he could keep the players in." Because there's so many quitting. So that's who Coach Bryant was.
Man, it's been a pleasure, man, having you on the show. This is a monumental moment for the show. I never had a Pro Football Hall of Famer. I NFL a lot of NFL players, but not a Hall of Famer like yourself. I appreciate your stories, man. Great. Thank you for coming on. Thank you
Thank you
so
for
much.
having me. Appreciate your invite. Sorry I missed last week.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thank you that you came on today. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's the one and only John Hanna, Pro Football Hall of Famer, 1991, as a New England Patriot, played his whole career with the Patriots from 1973, 1975, played with the University of Alabama, did his thing. It was a great interview, man. It's a monumental moment for Rashad Show. Even the Pro Football Hall of Fame, man. I think that's amazing. Great stories. Hopefully you enjoyed it. We'll take 4 music breaks. Someone's come